This week, the security picture was shaped by three overlapping trends: sharper insurgent pressure in Nigeria, rising fragility across parts of Africa, and a widening Middle East war whose consequences now reach shipping lines, oil markets, cyber systems, and civilian populations far beyond the theater of war. Across these incidents, one thing stands out very clearly: convergence. Local conflicts are no longer staying local. Violence is increasingly producing regional spillover, global economic stress, and consequences that go far beyond the battlefields. My name is Remande Shawulu. This is your security update from the other side. We begin in Nigeria, where one of the week's most serious incidents took place in Plateau State, in Kanam local government area of the state, where an armed group ambushed security personnel, killed 21 officers and operatives, including 2 senior military officers and 8 local security personnel. But the scale and the method of the ambush suggests local knowledge and intelligence, organized force rather than a random opportunistic banditry. This is happening outside the northeast, where we have insurgency that is acknowledged by the government. But it's also happening in Plateau State, a place that has known several cycles of violence, communal tension, armed reprisals, kidnapping, cattle rustling, banditry, and even attacks by groups that claim to be part of the insurgent groups that are fighting in northeastern part of Nigeria as well as the northwest of Nigeria. Another key concern last week was the reported violence in Woro village in Kwara State, and this has continued to shape security thinking because it raises fears that jihadist elements may be moving southward toward the Kainji forest corridor and further down to areas such as Shaki and eventually to the coastal part of Nigeria. Of course, it complicates military planning and potentially creates new sanctuary zones outside the traditional northeast and northwest. And in any case, in the last few months, we've had extensive attacks in the western part of Nigeria along that corridor. The killing of 3 soldiers that the Al-Qaeda claimed it was responsible for, and the attack within Oyo State also. In Katsina State, gunmen reportedly killed at least 21 people in a house-to-house attack. The principal significance here lies not only in the number killed, but in the method. This appears to be a new one. House-to-house killing creates intense fear because they communicate proximity, penetration, and the collapse of safety, even in private domestic spaces. This incident feeds into a larger concern: the growing difficulty of separating banditry from ideologically tinged militancy. Communities remain exposed, and the state remains unable to guarantee sanctuary at the household level. Not even the peace accords between local authorities and communities and insurgents seem to be helping. And now, not every critical Nigerian security development involved direct military violence. This week also brought renewed warning over food security. Humanitarian projections indicate that 35 million people in Nigeria could face hunger in 2026, with around 15,000 people in Borno State already in famine-like conditions. Of course, the cause of this is very clear: the disruption of farming, markets, aid delivery, and transportation. In northern Nigeria, hunger is not separate from insecurity. It is one of the downstream consequences of insecurity. Insecurity has resulted in the disruption of farming, displacement of people, and made the youth in those areas very vulnerable to recruit by these violent non-state actors. So the picture in Nigeria this week was layered: military pressure in the northeast, strategic anxiety about the southern spread of the Boko Haram, ISWAP, and Al-Qaeda, household terror in the northwest, and humanitarian stress deepening. Across Africa, the central theme was fragility: weak states under pressure, peace arrangements under strain, and conflicts showing signs of regional spillover. For instance, Sudan publicly accused Ethiopia of allowing drones to be launched from its territory into Sudan during the civil war. This accusation didn't come with a strategic significance. If neighboring states are becoming more directly involved in Sudan's war, then the conflict may be entering a more openly regional phase. Sudan's conflict has already killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. Historically, Sudanese wars often draw in actors through proxies, logistics, and border networks. This makes the development more than a diplomatic complaint. It is a possible escalation marker in one of Africa's deadliest wars. This accusation also connects to earlier reporting that Ethiopia may be hosting infrastructure used to train RSF fighters. If accurate, that would suggest not passive tolerance, but more structural external involvement. In strategic terms, that will affect how the war's sustainability and supply networks are understood. And in Eastern Congo, this week brought renewed warning that ceasefire language is not producing real de-escalation that is needed. Diplomatic concern over violations involving M23 and wider Kivu crisis suggests that the conflict remains unstable despite external pressure, including pressure from the United States. Eastern Congo has repeatedly cycled through declarations of calm, followed by renewed violence, repositioning, and displacement. This pattern is not peace interrupted by conflict. It is conflict briefly interrupted by diplomacy. Mozambique, another warning emerged when Rwanda indicated it could withdraw troops from Cabo Delgado if funding was not assured. No death toll was attached to that warning, but it matters because fragile counter-insurgency gains often depend on outside support. If troops' commitment weakens, militant resurgence becomes more likely. So across Africa, the deeper story this week was structural. Wars becoming regionalized, peace deals fraying, trade routes turning into battlegrounds, and conflict economies producing massive casualty disasters of their own. Outside Africa, the dominant theme was escalation, not on battlefields, but across energy, cyberspace, and strategic infrastructure. The most consequential development was the heaviest day of U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran since the war began in late February. Kenyan state media said more than 1,270 people had been killed since the conflict started. This marked a major escalation in a widening war. Its importance lies not in the casualties, but in the direct connection between conflict in Iran and global energy, shipping, and geopolitical stability. Strikes hit Iran oil depots and refineries around Iran, sending heavy black smoke over the capital. Attacks on oil and refinery sites signal a shift towards strategic attrition, targeting systems that sustain the war effort, that blurs the boundary between military infrastructure and mass civilian vulnerability. And Lebanon also in the Middle East moved deeper into conflict. Reporting indicated nearly 700 people killed and more than 800,000 people displaced as Israeli strikes expanded and Hezbollah started and increased the firing of rockets into northern Israel. Lebanon has become a secondary battlefield in the wider regional wars involving Iran and Israel. Of course, the government is not directly involved, but the Hezbollah, which is a political party in Lebanon and has its army and has its ammunition and weapons. Over the last 1 week, the international community and everybody in the world appears to be focused on what is happening in Iran. When the war will cease, or when there will be a regime change that will signal the end of the war in the way that the countries that started the war want. However, nobody knows how this is going to end. There have been different interpretations of the situation that is happening in Nigeria. And of course, the question has been asked whether the happenings in Nigeria are just local or have international connections and have implications in terms of the allegiance of the people who are involved in this fighting. The interpretation by several people is that this is a local affair, that you have people that are fighting over different types of issues, fighting over land, fighting over grazing reserves or grazing routes, or people who are being displaced and they want to be integrated into the society. And so the information that is coming up around the world shows that there is a greater coordination between all these factors that used to be. There are now credible reports from analysts and intelligence sources that ISWAP is funding certain parts of Fulani militant groups. ISWAP views the ongoing farmer-herder conflicts as a strategic opportunity to target Christian communities, which they see as an obstacle to their goal of an Islamic state in Nigeria. And of course, there's also credible information that Boko Haram and ISWAP, bitter rivals a few years ago, are coming back together. There are reports that show that both groups are intensifying simultaneous attacks. There are reports that the tempo of their cooperation is increasing and has reached a level that the two groups are coordinating to do whatever they are doing, which is why there appears to be more attacks, several simultaneous attacks in different parts of Nigeria, especially the northeast at the same time. And what is the goal? There are reports that now show that ISWAP has moved beyond simple banditry that operates in the northwest. They are currently operating a quasi-state structure in parts of the northeast and Lake Chad basin. That is, they are collecting taxes from local populations. They have established Sharia courts to resolve disputes. They are providing protection to those who comply, effectively challenging government sovereignty in those regions. And of course, a Catholic priest recently came out to announce that part of his parish has been taken over by Boko Haram members who approached the Christian community, told them that they will live at peace with them if they convert. And he says some of the parishioners have converted and have done the Shahada or the Muslim prayer to become Muslims in order to live in those areas. It is also believed that the recent escalations, that is the mass abductions in 2026, of women and children in Borno State and the ones in Kwara are part of the coordinated plans by this group or the mastermind that is now controlling all these groups that used to be thought to be separate as part of its plans to create a system where it will be able to project an Islamic state for West Africa in northern Nigeria. The bottom line is that as of today, the Nigerian security appears to be thinking that these conflicts are local, that they do not have international connections and do not have the Islamic agenda that is embedded in them. But however, the truth of the matter, as we now know it, is that these groups, even if they were not working with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and ISWAP to create an Islamic caliphate, now they have been approached, they have reached some agreements, and they are coordinating and working together. If you want to know more about the security situation in Nigeria and around Africa, just click on that subscriber screen, or better still, support this channel by joining it as a member so that you'll be able to receive notifications whenever there's a new development across Nigeria. My name is Rumande Shawulu. This has been Update from the Other Side.